As far as monetary reform, I'm actually working with the Green Party's Monetary Reform Committee to develop a platform for monetary reform that includes community banking, where we're not loaning money that doesn't exist as it works in the system now, where banks will create loans and develop that on money that they don't actually have. So we want to get back to a community banking where there's more responsive to the community. Obviously, I agree. Interest rates are clearly out of control, and somebody who, when I was making $40,000 a year, I couldn't get a loan to buy a riding lawnmower just because I didn't have good credit, and it really hurts the economy more than people realize not to be able to get micro loans or micro grants to help people develop either a business or just take care of their stuff at home. So certainly I am looking deeply into monetary reform. The water, when I went back to school, I studied a lot of, but I had to take a science class, and the science class was about environmental ecology, and we visited a couple of water plants as well as, I did a couple of those things when I was in Boy Scouts. So I believe water is a human right, and we don't need to be adding chemicals to water to improve them. What we need to do is find cleaner, safer ways to purify water or use aquifer water for potability, as well as develop recycling programs so that we're not just dumping water waste from home or industrial use to back into our waterways, which we all agree are pretty polluted. When I was doing research in 2010, I found that just in one day, over 3 million pounds of untreated human waste was dumped into the Ohio River in just one day. To the north of me, I've got Toledo, and they're seeing a lot of issues with the toxic runoff, and that's another issue that I hope to address in my renewable infrastructure investment program, to get away from a lot of these chemicals that we're using for farming, which leads me into your next segment about all the chemicals in our food as well. We need to develop a system where we can get these people certified organic gardeners in a less expensive way. I know that I spoke to some people in Missouri, and they were telling me that the state has developed a program to help fund people getting that certification as an organic grower, so they can provide organic and fresher produce to communities. And agriculture is another issue that's really touched in my renewable infrastructure, about creating shorter loops for our food services. As far as the geochemical engineering, really, I don't think if we are doing that we don't need to be dumping more chemicals into the air more than what we are already doing through our natural, not unnatural manufacturing processes that are just dumping chemicals into the air, the water, and onto the land. We need to look into not to trying to geoengineer our people or our planet. We just need to learn to work in symbiosis more with our planet. As somebody who does garden and grow his own food, I am very well aware of how the environment changes and how I had to wait later to plant my garden this spring, and I was expecting the warm to stick around a little bit longer, so I expected to be able to grow more in the garden this year, but we hit a cold snap, and I think I got some frost that killed off about half my plants in my garden, so that cut short my growing season by about 2-3 weeks. I'm being more aware and symbiotic with our environment, I think, is the best way to to design our future. Instead of trying to compete with the planet, we need to work with it.
Well, you've heard of the book called Under an Ionized Sky, correct?
Yes. Yeah, I have heard of it.
Where the lady that wrote the book kind of documents what's going on with the spraying of all the different types of chemicals and how dangerous they are to plant life and human life and every. As a matter of fact, they've practically on this planet they've practically destroyed the infrastructure of life on this planet.
Yeah, it's somebody who worked with a lot of veterans with their claims on Agent Orange exposure from Vietnam. I understand how dangerous just a minute amount of chemicals can cause long-term pain in not only the environment but in people as well.
So as president, how would you stop the chemtrails? I mean, if Congress has no control over it, if Congress doesn't regulate the spraying of chemtrails, the pilots can't stop it because they'll be fired if they try to stop it. So how, as president, are you going to be able to stop that from happening?
Executive order, using the military to put an end to it. I'm sure there's a lot of different ways that we could go about ending it. It's just we need to look at all the options. I mean, directly defunding it would be the quickest way to end any harmful programs that our nation is running.
Yeah, but I don't think that's funded through Congress.
Well, we find out where they're funded from through or by and put an end to it.
Speaking, let me change topics on you, Dennis. Speaking of executive order, can you tell me how executive orders are shown in the original Constitution? Where in the original Constitution of the United States of America does it talk about the president having the power to do executive orders?
I don't have it right in front of me right now, so I couldn't tell you. But under general law, an executive is allowed to create. But there is I forget which section it is. I think it's Section 7, where the president has the right to make appointments when the Senate is out of session. And constitutional scholars would certainly say that an extension of that would be able to write executive orders to make short-term solutions to legislative delayed action.
Well, how come Congress doesn't have to approve executive orders? Because they're not even allowed to change an executive order. That's how President Trump and Obama was able to do everything they did under executive order, and Congress had their hands tied. There wasn't anything they could do to stop it because executive order had nothing to do through the democratic process.
That's not entirely true. The Congress can make a law that overturns an executive order.
Well, since you're from Ohio, have you ever heard of the group called Right Way Law?
No.
Well, back in the 90s, I ran across a group of people that called themselves Right Way Law, and they were a group of self-proclaimed patriot Americans that were showing, they were bringing up constitutional issues and all that kind of thing. And they would travel from city to city and speak to people, and they would share everything they learned about the Constitution. And one of the things that they shared with everybody that they came in contact with is they gave everybody a copy of the new corporate Constitution of the United States of America. And that came about around 5 years after the end of the Civil War. And what happened, according to this, and I actually read a copy of it. It was in They found it in the Yale Law Library, and made copies of it for everybody. The Skull and Crossbones people were privy to it because many of the presidents, like George H.W. Bush, and all them that were Yaleys and Elis, they were very familiar with this. And right after we had five years of Never Land. After the Civil War ended, they murdered Abraham Lincoln, and then the United States was like in Never Land. And Right Way Law pointed out that the generals got together and decided, since the United States was no longer operating under the Constitution of 1789, they created their own Constitution where they incorporated the United States of America, and they made it a corporation. And the power of this organization was all these generals, like General Grant and all them, signing on board to provide the military power. And they signed a brand new Constitution where all U.S. senators and Congress would only be advisory to the president. The only law of the land would be presidential executive order, and the newly elected president of the United States would be declared, he would have full dictatorial powers over the people and Congress. And I saw this myself. I saw it in writing, the new Constitution. And it's not readily publicly available, but Right Way Law dug it out and they found a copy of it. And that's where executive orders started. At the same time, Black's Law Dictionary started printing out legal terms. Edition number 1 started at the same time that the corporate America started, and they defined the terms of what new corporate America was. Now, the trick in order to pull this over on the people is they had to have the senators and congressmen from each state elected as it was in the original Constitution, but they were not told they were only advisory in nature. They were only advisors to the president. And so, I have seen that, and if Right Way Law is still around, you might want to look them up. And, a lot of people feel that that's really true, and that's why they've established what you might call a maritime law in the United States. And I've talked to judges that have gone through judge schools, and they teach them in the judge schools that the Constitution, what they tell the judges is that we no longer operate under the Constitution of 1789, but fake it so you don't misrule against somebody so bad that people actually find out that that's really the truth. And so you have, if there's any truth to any of this, and what a lot of people now believe, you have kind of an uphill climb here on how to deal with this situation as this becomes more and more publicly available. So would you like to comment on that?
I have not heard anything about that. I would be interested in reading about it. I just actually I'm in the middle of reading a book right now about the Civil War. A lot of my research that I've done has been prior to the Civil War, and I was really only here in the last year or so got into anything post-Civil War. I read McKinley's biography and a couple other things, Teddy Roosevelt's biography and a few other things. And actually a friend of mine who teaches at University of Cincinnati sent me a book about the Knights of the Golden Circle. It was one of the precursors to the Ku Klux Klan. So I would definitely be, if you would like to send me some information on that to my email at dlpotus2020@gmail.com, I would love to read about
what I would suggest is you try to find the Right Way Law Group. It's right there in Ohio, right where you're from. And I think they might have operated out of Columbus. But, they should still be around somewhere, some of those guys. And
okay.
And just as an idea, like one day I was trying to show people, the reality of chemtrails. So I went on YouTube and typed in chemtrails, and they started showing these military pilots flying along and watching an airliner dumping tons and tons of chemtrails in the atmosphere. And then they had to stop, and they flew along for about 10 miles where nothing came out of the back of the jet engines. And then all of a sudden it started spreading again, and the two Air Force pilots said to each other they must have been switching tanks from one tank to another tank, where they had to switch it off for a couple of minutes while they were switching tanks. I mean, and then what really kind of knocked my socks off was there was an article by Prince, the singer from the Minneapolis area,
Yeah.
and he said that he was there was a whole bunch of people that tutored him when he was a young man, that from the South, and a bunch of blacks that had been following politics ever since well before the Civil War. And one of these guys that studied the real law, he said to Prince, he said, there were 8 presidents in recorded history in America before George Washington. And it really, really upset him. Prince was ready to hang somebody. He was so upset when he found that out. So there's something about the history of our country that's went on where the information got buried, and a lot of people know about it, but they're not bringing it out to the public. So
Yeah.
I just thought I'd share that with you also.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are missed from our education, like the Second Constitutional Convention that gives us the Constitution that we have now. The First Constitutional Convention gave us the Confederation, Articles of Confederation, and John Hanson was the first elected president of the United States. So but the education is another issue I'd really like to get into deeply. But we're probably not a lot of time to get into that. But I think an enriched education and having kids guide their own education a little bit more would be a better way to educate our youth. When I was younger, I had a lot of curiosity, but when I was in 4th grade and when I was in 10th grade, I was being taught the same thing. So I don't think much changed between those 6 years of the public education system. So when I got out of school, before I started college, I started educating myself my own way by picking up a book and getting into some research and reading articles from magazines and whatever information I can get a hold of myself. So I think really our education system needs to be overhauled. Really, one of the more revolutionary ideas I have is, we don't get teenagers up at 8 o'clock in the morning to start school. Instead, we let them start school around 10 or 11 o'clock. I let them go to school until about 6 o'clock in the evening. Instead of having no recess for kids that are 5 to 12 years old, we let them have an hour in the morning and an hour in the afternoon before they have to sit in class for instruction.
Well, thank you, Dennis. I'll let somebody else chime in. I've said too much anyway, but well, thank you very much for your comments on all that.
No problem.
Yeah, it's great conversation. This is an uphill challenge for you, Dennis. There's a lot here, and as Bob commented, brought up some things that are going on. It's even more so, as you see, there's a lot behind the scenes going on. That's why when Dwayne is running for president here, he's not really focusing on issues, because issues are, they're made up. We're basically, the bottom line is our survival and the environment, and what can we do to enhance that and to be better off with the environment. What can we do actually to not destroy the environment, because a lot of what, like Bob mentioned, a lot of what we do is to destroy, pollute, poison the environment, which is killing everybody. So what can we do to offset that? that if there's an issue, I would say that's the issue. So anyway, I know that Claudia's here. Claudia, would you like to comment, or do you have a question from Corpus Christi, Texas?
Yes, sir. And to your guests, what a wonderful sharing that you're giving us information we need to function better as a person living in the corporation of the United States. One of the questions that I have is along the same line as Robert has just a few minutes ago, is as a president, how can we encourage or get the children to help us save their planet? Because we're the ones that messed it up for them, and they're coming into it. How can we get them to bring forth ideas that are simple and easy to do, something on their level? That way we can incorporate all of these ideas without having to deal with, quote unquote, the government and all kinds of restrictions. I really am tired of all of this force used to stop people with good ideas from coming forward. They need to be protected. I've gathered over the years that there are a lot of inventions that have come forward that could save our planet right now, but big corporations, oil companies, agricultural, pharmaceutical, all of these companies that manufacture products that pollute and destroy our planet, we don't need to bother them or touch them, just say, go ahead and do that, but we have a better solution over here. And maybe we could get more of the adults on board, so to speak, with the idea of save your child's planet. Don't pollute, don't buy products, change your car to a water-powered car, use solar energy, get rid of all the things that impact your life and give you, restrictions that are not helping the planet. If you went through the children, possibly the rest of the country would become educated, quote unquote, into what's possible of saving this planet for them. It's their planet that we're destroying, and we need to stop it. Thank you for this time.
Oh, I absolutely agree. I go through these waves where I get disappointed in the young people by seeing them do like the Tide Pod Challenge or something like that, but then I get heartened by seeing people like Greta who've actually gone out of her way, got out of her comfort zone, left her country, and has become a model of derision and ridicule by people who deny that the climate change exists. She's putting her life and her humanity on the line to try to educate people, and this is why I think an enriched education system would benefit us to no degree. When I was young, I used to take apart radios just to look at see how they worked and try to figure out how I could make this thing do this or that or the other. But it wasn't until I got into college that I actually had a class that I could actually understand what all those little components did and figured out what they meant and how they operated together. I just wish that that opportunity was presented to me when I was much younger. I think I probably would have come out as an electrical or mechanical engineer instead of somebody who knows how to do a lot of different things, but hasn't figured out exactly what to do with his life. Other than helping people. That's the greatest gift and realization that I've come through my life, and that's through my exposure through a lot of different things, is that I've discovered that it's not the skills and talents that I have that I want to benefit from. I have a deep-rooted need to want to help people, and that's pretty much what I've dedicated the rest of my life to over the last 9-10 years is to do what I can to help people the best I can. And, this wasn't mentioned at all in my bio, but I am an ordained Buddhist minister. So I try to seek balance in not only my life, but to try to help people seek balance in their own lives, and finding happiness is not necessarily the thing that you can do through work, but having those experiences and knowledge through your experiences is what gives you happiness. And I find my happiness just in helping people and teaching people what I have to show.
Thank you, Dennis and Claudia.